You're live.
So recording. So I guess we're ready to get started. Awesome. Hi everyone. So welcome to the SoundGirls and Women in Vinyl panel on careers in vinyl. And I'm very grateful and honored that SoundGirls and Women in Vinyl have finally come together. I think it's such a momentous panel just because I don't think there's ever been a webinar or panel that focuses on the careers specifically, and the fact that there's actually women and many of us that are part of these different fields. So I guess we're just gonna do a quick introduction for each of us that are part of the panel. I'm gonna start with myself. I'm Jet Galindo. I'm a mastering engineer and vinyl cutter based in Los Angeles for the studio called The Bakery. You, Jen?
Yeah, so I'm Jenn Eugenio. I'm the sales manager at Furnace Record Pressing on the side of DC. And I'm also the one who started Women in Vinyl. So I'm glad to be doing this with SoundGirls, one of my favorite organizations. And thank you all so much for joining. This is great.
How about you, Amanda?
My name's Amanda McCabe. I've been working in the music industry for about 20 years now in various aspects. Recently, music history archivist, and now working with Universal Music Group, focusing on a new team, strategy and tactics for new products.
That's awesome. And
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Your turn, Robin.
Oh, me. Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Robin. I hate calling myself a mastering engineer because I still feel like I'm such an amateur at it.
Don't say it. Yes, you are. Claim it.
So I cut short run vinyl in Toronto, and have been for the last year and a half. I was starting to apprentice on lacquers, and then Apollo blew up, and so there went my lacquer apprenticeship, kind of. So, but in, I think, beautiful irony, short run vinyl became kind of a stopgap. So I've been cutting more records than ever. So yeah, I do that. I kind of want to start a label, which is crazy, and I've been working in the music business since 2005. So
that's awesome. Robin is also one of the only women cutting engineers in Canada. Is that correct?
That's the one.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Miss Lenise Bent.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm an engineer producer, and so I create vinyl recordings, and so all of the rest of you can cut them, manufacture them, sell them, play them. And I have an all analog record coming out in October. Finally, the manufacturing company RTI is finally making records again for a band called Primal Kings, but it was recorded to tape, mixed to tape, and the lacquers were cut from the 1/2-inch 2-track master. So there's no digital in this actual piece of vinyl. And we're very excited about that. Had a lot of fun creating it. And there you go. And thanks for being here. I'm excited to be here myself.
Awesome. And for those that haven't read Lenise's profile, she's also known for her work with Steely Dan, Blondie. So look up her background. So it's awesome. So we also have another panelist that is, we're still waiting for her to go online. Her name is Brittany Benton, and as soon as she's online, we'll check in with her. All right, so the first thing we're gonna cover is just talking about women in vinyl. So this is Jen. We have some questions for you. So tell us about women in vinyl. I know it started in 2018, 2 years ago. Happy anniversary. So this has been covered in interviews with you, but give us a quick background on why you created Women in Vinyl and why is it important that you started this?
Yeah, well, I've been a vinyl collector for a really long time, and I really wanted to get into the vinyl industry, but I didn't really know how or, you know, where to sort of look for that sort of job. And being a fan of music, even, I didn't really know. I didn't think that there was any career path for me. I just thought I'd always enjoy music, and that was that. And so when Furnace started pressing in-house in Virginia, I'm actually from this area, and I got a job there. And so moved back, started really kind of seeing behind the scenes in the vinyl industry. And I was seeing more and more women doing really amazing things with music and with vinyl. And I would find that you don't really see that recognition. Those people aren't really at the forefront of the platform. And I think vinyl's always kind of been looked at as a boys club for some reason. I don't really know why, but even shopping at record stores, you know, I would be treated differently than my boyfriend. So, you know, or I would have a prospective client call and I would get, you know, the process explained to me. And so I was just sort of like, you know, there's so many awesome women doing things behind the scenes, and there needs to be a way to highlight them and really showcase what they're doing and have a safe place and a community for women and girls to find role models and mentors and people they feel safe asking, how do I set up a turntable? How do I get into, you know, doing what you're doing without feeling like they're not in a place where they can ask that and be looked down upon. So I really wanted to start the blog for that purpose. And then from there, you know, it's kind of a social platform, and hopefully eventually it will be a nonprofit as well. So,
That's awesome. You mentioned something about a meme that also sparked this whole determination to start Women in Vinyl. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I always talk about that meme when people ask about Women in Vinyl. It was so annoying. It was this like 1950s couple, and they're sitting there in their living room, and the guy's holding the record, and it's like insert any band, like this is Led Zeppelin's First Press, White Label, blah, blah, blah. And the woman is sitting there knitting, and she's like, I could care less, essentially. And it got reposted and reposted so many times, and with all of these guys being like, oh, yeah, I know how this guy feels. And it got to the point where I was just like, enough. You know, it's not about putting like men against women or anything like that. It's just, you know, giving the recognition where it's due. You know, I'm a huge nerd. I mean, I have like, 40 plus variants of Master of Reality. So, you know, I'm the guy in that situation.
Actually, if you guys should check out Instagram, Jen's Instagram, she holds like weekly Sabbath Sundays.
Yeah.
Mistress
yeah.
of Reality, everybody, get into it. It's so good.
It's
Yes.
insane.
I'll
So,
have to check that out.
Mhm.
so since starting Women in Vinyl, do you have a number of the women you've profiled on the website so far? Because on the website, if you guys go to womeninvinyl.com, Jenn does a great job of profiling women from different facets of the vinyl industry. And all of us here on the panel got together because Jenn featured each of us on the Women in Vinyl website. So how many profiles have you covered so far, Jenn?
There have been 74. I have a couple more pending. And then some have been, you know, a couple that felt like they wanted to do it together. So Banana Records in Florida. I think Maggie did one. So yeah, a couple people feel more comfortable doing it as a duo, and I'm totally fine with that too. And if anybody actually knows anyone that they feel should be highlighted, please do send them my way. The hardest part is really just getting the interview and images back to get it posted because everyone's so busy. But yeah, I mean, I don't know everyone by any means, and so suggestions are always welcome. I try to feature people that are working with vinyl in some way, because I find that there's a lot of really great collector blogs already, and there's a lot of really great women in music specific type sites. So I really want to show kind of the ins and outs of what we do to make the records that everybody loves.
Just a quick rundown. What are some jobs or careers that these women are from those that you've covered? So for example, there's mastering engineers, record shop owners. One thing that stood out to me is the woman who runs Copal Designs.
Yeah.
So there's someone who actually has a company that designs those dividers for vinyl records.
Yeah.
So what other jobs were covered in your profile so far?
Yeah, I think, record store owners, DJs. I mean, that's a job. Vinyl probably would have died at some point had it not been for DJs still.
Totally.
So, I mean, I think that's a really important aspect. Record labels, specifically that focus on vinyl. There's a lot of really great ones out there. And then, yeah, all of the things that you mentioned as well. But, I think it would be interesting if we could at some point get someone that does like art for vinyl. What an awesome job that would be.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Album cover art.
Totally. What a job.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of things. I mean, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is how many people touch it. I mean, it's not a one person thing. There's so many hands involved in getting a record out that I think people will see soon that there are a lot of different areas where you can get involved. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So if you're following our conversation right now, if you have any specific questions about all of the topics that we're discussing, just leave it here and we're going to cover it on Q&A after our discussion. So Jenn, I'll let you hold the ball and just introduce each of the panelists and pick on the brains of the inner workings of each of our career paths.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it would be interesting if we all just sort of went one at a time and talked about maybe how you got into the industry and what your day in the life is like. And I know that, Amanda for one, Robin also have had a couple different jobs within the industry. And if you want to kind of talk about those different facets, I think that could be kind of interesting. So Amanda, do you want to start?
Sure. It's funny that you guys said how interesting it would be to make vinyl art. Kind of early on in my career, I accidentally stumbled into owning a company called Missing Parts, where I actually did the layout and design for records for independent artists. And it was really cool. It was really fun. And I literally just stumbled into it. I was playing video games on a friend's couch and another friend walked in and they were talking about this new record our friend Dave was putting out. And it was, hey, how do we get this painting on the cover of this next record? And the painting is sitting there and the person I'm trying to beat in this video game and losing dreadfully said, Amanda can do it. And I was like, I can? And then I kind of thought about it a minute and I was like, yeah, I could probably figure that out. And then I owned a company and I worked on a number of records with a bunch of different artists. And in terms of, all of the different careers and jobs and whatever that I've had in the music industry, I would say just being open to doing something new and adapting to whatever strange opportunity falls in your lap at any given time is probably the single most important aspect, and not really allowing yourself to kind of get too bogged down in what you've already done. I think that carries all the way through kind of, I worked with record labels or did my own thing. I was a music critic, I was a DJ, I worked in the digital distribution sphere, the mobile distribution sphere, went back to school, got my master's in archiving to work on historic sound recordings and digitization and preservation, which kind of led me to kind of combining a lot of those different things in what I'm doing now, which is really focused on metadata, which is a, really important thing in terms of digital distribution, but also physical distribution. Everything that happens on the internet and online happens through metadata. And I learned so much about that through my degree in archives. So not only did I take everything that I had built on before and kind of wrapped it into this love of music history, but then I found a way to kind of continue to contribute to making strides in how we help artists make money today in the world that we live in today, and how do we keep pushing that forward in all different aspects, whether it's vinyl production or selling vinyl online or whatever we're doing. There's always this like push to just being open to what the next thing is, and that's always been kind of where I find myself. And I don't know, it doesn't really feel intentional, but it certainly feels like a common thread through everything that I've done in working with music over the past 20 years. So I would say that's the number one guiding light, you know, be deeply passionate and just keep running after it, because it's always a moving goalpost. What it looks like will never be what you expect.
Awesome. Robin, you want to go next?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Amanda said. I mean, it's kind of having a moving radar and just kind of seeing where you could find an opportunity, where you might be able to use some of the skill set that you have. Or in my case, just go bullheaded into something that you're like, hey, that looks cool. Why don't I try that? Nobody does that. All right, let's whatever. And just, I don't know, find your way, luckily. We were talking about earlier, it's just about making your own luck and like making your life work the way that you want it to, creating your opportunities. I mean, being open and being coachable, being somebody that people want to take along with you is, or along with them, I think has been kind of one of the easiest ways that my career has progressed. It's always kind of been like, do this one thing and then this thing happens and then you go this way. Going back to 2005, I was working at a guitar store and was going to lots of shows, and I kept seeing these two dudes that always looked really stern, and they were always arms crossed at the front and like kind of looking at everybody. And they started to see me at shows and shows and shows, and they're like, hey, you're always here. And I was like, uh-huh. They're like, do you want to get in for free? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And they're like, okay, why don't you be the head of the street team and you can just like be the flyer kid? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. And then from there it became, oh, you know stuff about gear? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? So then I started to like take backline from my job and set up shows and like minor stage manage and just kind of like learned that way. And then I was the head of the crew and I was running all the guys that were building the shows, and I was on stage and I was being a stage manager. Meanwhile, I was production managing. I was doing immigration for the entire country. I was being loaned out to other promoters and other entities to do the immigration for their shows, because historically the Canadian border, not really easy to get over if you're a musician. So luckily I had a little bit of a gift and I kind of wormed my way into that. And then it was like, yeah, just kind of do whatever you want. And then took a little bit of a hiatus and was like, hey, they press records in Calgary. Maybe I should be their social media person. But by the time I had come back off of another tour, they had closed. And I was like, but vinyl's like huge right now. And I mean, I have a 3,000 piece vinyl collection myself. Many of yours, I must say, Tusk is my favorite album of all time. So Thank you for that so much.
My pleasure.
I could fangirl on you all day, trust me.
Thank you.
That's why I'm like, why am I on this panel? Okay. But yeah, it was just kind of like, oh, maybe I could fit in there and try and figure out why they closed. And then between that and figuring out like the new record presses and, you know, that whole nightmare, and then going to the first Making Vinyl conference, meeting Jenn, meeting all of these other crazy people. I mean, there was like 4 women at the first Making Vinyl total. And I was just there to like poke Mike Dixon and be like, hey, you know stuff about lids. Tell me everything. We're going to be best friends. And he's like, who are you? And I was like, hi, I'm from Canada. You'll love me, I promise. And I was like, should I buy this lathe? And he's like, yeah, do it. And I was like, okay. And then came home and that started that whole ball rolling. And here we are. So I mean, long and short, that's exactly it. Just, I mean, if you really want it, you got to go after it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lenise?
Well, yes, being myopically driven helps. I grew up in a musical family. Not some of them were professional, some of them weren't, but lots of records and lots of music all the time in my house. And I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and so I had older brothers and sisters who would bring home lots of music, and that I got to, you know, enjoy as a small child, and just was from out of the chute. I was inundated with playing records. That was my favorite thing to do as a child, was, you know, playing records, whether they were children's records or my siblings' records or anybody's records. That was just that, and listening to rock and roll and on a little transistor radio that was my brother's that I would sneak, and you know, I was kind of wired for it. And then my oldest brother worked at an electronics store, and he would bring home tube amps and things to work on, and just that's one of my earliest comfort memories and aromas, you know, smells that conjure up memories, was vacuum tubes. The warming up was just still to this day, when somebody fires up a tube amp or something and I can smell that, it just, you know, warms my heart. And so started out that way. Grew up in Los Angeles, so I was in the Screen Children's Guild, because you could put your kids to work here. You know, child labor was accepted on that level. And so my brother and I got to be in, you know, TV and film, cue the kids, you know, and so I had an exposure to equipment and gear and technology and all of that, and just, you know, much prefer doing that than, instead of when they say, okay, you know, cue the kids, I go, oh no, I have to go work, can I come back and hang out with you behind the camera? And they say, sure, you know, and that's like 8 years old. And so we had that advantage here. We had Hollywood here. So by osmosis, you know, and then the music industry and shows and concerts. My boyfriend, of course, was in a band who wasn't, and at that time, and so we'd play. He would play different clubs around, and we were just teenagers. You know, our mothers would have to drop us off and take us to the gigs and all. But so I was kind of roadie a bit there, and drum roadie actually. And
that's the worst one.
I know, and he wasn't even the boyfriend, but but somebody had to do it. Yeah, you know, whatever needed to be done. So I just had that awareness, and then the guitar player in one of his bands later was also a sound engineer for an artist and a producer named Leon Russell. And Leon, who's quite iconic in the industry, had one of the first home studios. And so Roger said, come over and see this. And I was a huge fan of Leon Russell. So I said, sure. So I'll come up. So I went over and I walked in, and I see a console, and where a dining room was supposed to be, what had been turned into this amazing control room with you know, monitors and faders and tape machines and outboard gear and fabulous sound coming out. And I just said to Roger, I said, show me how to work this thing. And the next day I dropped out of university. I was studying film. Dropped out of university and found a recording school and signed up, and then told my parents. And fortunately, they were cool about it, because recording schools were cheaper than university anyway. So, anyway, graduated and got and I would get to go to Leon's house to practice what I learned at recording school, which was a huge plus. And I want to share that with any of you people who are going to school and learning it. That isn't the only thing you need to do is, I'm sure you all know, embrace all opportunities that come your way, that, you know, show up and be there and drop everything and go. And if you're as passionate as I'm sure the majority of us are, you'll do it, and you'll just seize every opportunity. So that was the biggest reason why I excelled over a lot of people, was because I was having hands-on, you know, practice, as well as the safety net of a recording school. And so when I got my job, I was already, I got hired at the Village Studios. It was Village Recorder back then, and I assisted for 3 years, and that's was an extraordinary time in making music and records. And so I learned from the best engineers, producers, working with the best artists on some of the best records ever, and just built my own toolbox, you know, as I had the great opportunity of working with Al Schmidt, and working with Roger Nichols with Steely Dan, and working with Ken Kelly, and you know, with Fleetwood Mac, and just so many, and Norbert Putnam, and people from Nashville. So that allowed me to become an engineer on my own right, with producer Mike Chapman, who was a big pop producer from England, and he did Blondie and the Knack and all those sort of records, and he wanted to make me the first woman producer. So I said, well, yeah, okay, and popped in with him, and as a result, that one right there is I got to be the first woman to make a platinum album. And yes, yeah, so I thank him all the time, and that was a lot of fun. And it's also the first hit rap song with music too. Rapture is on that. I've got to make that. So
foundation, just foundations.
and it was just a blast, and oh, thank you. Then I went, and so then I went into post-production, and learned amazing things about sound design and all of that, and then got back to making records. I just missed it eventually, and so I'm back producing and engineering. Vinyl is my favorite recording. Analog is just such a joy for me, because I can, and I love sharing that knowledge with other people. Karrie was kind enough, and we put together a analog tape recording workshop that we still have the part 3 to do with Jet, but just to train people to have those skills, because that just makes you more valuable to the industry. Just knowing how to handle tape, how to thread a tape machine, run the transport, edit, learn all its, you know, the paradigms of, you know, totally destructive audio. It's a rush, but it's a lot of fun. You make decisions, and then you have that skill set, and I'm convinced that more people would use tape if they knew how. So and that mixed anywhere from all analog to all digital and everything in between is what I do. And I even work with artists right now. My day right now is accessing my current artists Luna program. She's using that software through Universal Audio, which is like Pro Tools sort of, but because of the lockdown, I just wanted to share, it's kind of cool. There's we access the two two-party authorization formats, and then I can manipulate her session on her gear at her place. I don't even have to have any of it. I just have my computer and headphones, and so we have a lot of fun with that. So it's gone all the way up to that, and as Robin, you were saying, and Amanda, and I will just reiterate too, just turn on a dime, be flexible, be open to new adventures, do at least one thing every day that scares you. That's Eleanor Roosevelt said that, and that's one of my mottos. And because opportunities are there, and you don't always know that that's what that is, but one thing leads to another, and before you know it, kaboom, something lands in your lap. Oh, wow, so that's what that was about. So just, persevere and be present and follow. It sounds so corny, but it's just so true. Follow your vision and that passion. You only have one life, and so you got to be happy, and you got to do that thing that makes you happy, and don't put it off.
Jet, what about you?
Sure. Also, just a heads up that our last panelist has joined us. Brittany Benton is right here.
Oh, yay!
Yes. Hi, Brittany. Yeah,
Hi, Brittany.
So,
Hello. I'm sorry.
Hi. So, do you mind giving just a very quick introduction on what you do?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was ringing out an order right now. I'm the owner of Brittany's Record Shop. You see, I've got like a ton of like vinyl boxes that I need to crush behind me.
That's awesome.
I produce, I DJ vinyl. I'm a collector, just, all things wax. I love it. Like I said, we're doing some digging and stuff right now. But yeah, just if it spins, you can drop a needle on it and it's funky, like I'm into it,
Awesome. So yeah, you can go back to what you're doing, and we'll let you know as soon as like I have questions.
Yeah, I'll just need 30 more seconds.
Yeah,
sorry,
no
I'll be
worries,
right back.
no worries.
All right.
So just a quick background on how I got into what I'm doing. So what I always like to tell people who ask how I got to where I am today is, when I was a kid, I don't think I ever told anyone that I wanted to be a mastering engineer. That's not like a typical dream as a kid. But for all of us who are working here in the vinyl industry, I think the one common thread is the fact that we love music. And no matter which direction the point is, it's like, for me, as long as I'm like freaking working in music and being part of the creation process, that's the dream, and I'm so grateful to be living my dream right now. So how did I get to vinyl cutting and mastering? I come from the Philippines. Didn't learn vinyl there, and I also grew up in a time where like vinyl is starting to like move away, and the more common is like cassettes and CDs. So I didn't really fully experience the vinyl format as I was growing up. However, I grew up in a family of just filled with music. My parents actually trained cover bands in the Philippines. So yeah, I named Joe and Jet for a reason. So we have like a rehearsal band, like rehearsal studio at home where bands just play. So there's always like loud music at home. So I just knew I wanted to pursue a life in music. But my parents, who are musicians, said, you got to get a real degree first before you're allowed to do music, because we know how music is a gamble, that sort of talk. So I have a degree in psychology. And as soon as I finished psychology, I just knew I wanted to pursue music. As I was in college pursuing psychology, I was also a very active member of a classical choral group. I'm actually a classical musician. That's my background. Even though I'm called Joan Jett, yeah, I'm a classical soprano. So, yeah. So, yeah, but I just knew I wanted to pursue music, and there's no sound engineering degree or school in the Philippines. So I just knew that I had to be surrounded by technology as much as I could until the opportunity comes that I could go to the US here and study audio engineering in Berklee College of Music, I knew that that's just the direction that I wanted to go. So I worked in a multimedia training facility in the Philippines, teaching web design and nonlinear video editing and all that stuff to priests and nuns. That's the opportunity that I found. So I was teaching priests and nuns technology, but that just so happens that that institution also has a recording studio. And as I was being interviewed for my position in teaching multimedia, I told them I wanted to be a sound engineer, and I plan on taking formal studies eventually. And then the director said, you do know that we have a recording studio and we can have you intern there after your work hours. I almost didn't get the internship because the sound engineer found out the day before that Jet Galindo was a woman. That's always a story that I like including because I almost didn't make it to where I am today if I went by Joanne rather than Jet. So at that point, it was too late for the senior engineer to say no. And it just made me want to prove myself more. And that applies to any woman in audio, in music. We just have to prove ourselves extra hard just to actually make people realize that we know what we do. And fortunately, it got to a point where the engineers, I gained their trust, and I was enough to just learn recording, music, and mastering in a commercial recording studio in the Philippines. So when I went to Berklee College of Music, I was already equipped with that knowledge, and I just had a very deep fondness for mastering. And not when you're in audio engineering school, you don't exactly know where you're going to end up in, because I think one of the attendees, let me mute. Okay, sorry. But yeah, again, also one of the things that Amanda mentioned a while ago is you just have to have passion, because as you're pursuing your career path, you don't exactly know where you're going to land. I didn't know I was going to be in vinyl, but I just knew that I wanted to be in music. And as an audio engineer, I thought that I'm going to end up as a classical recording engineer. And I was supposed to have a job waiting for me when I graduated to be a recording engineer at the Aspen Music Festival, which is freaking cool. But my immigration employment authorization didn't arrive on time. So I had like—
what a disappointment.
Yeah, it sucked. And it was 2 days before my flight. Yeah. So anyway, 3 months of like reservation for that music festival down the drain, and I had no job lined up for me. But I just kept knocking doors and like reaching out to all my peers and contacts in music. And for my case, it was Berklee, to help for leads. And the audio engineering department connected me with Avatar Studios in New York. And that's how I eventually became a recording engineer for the producer of Chic and Nile Rodgers, who remains a good friend to this day. So I thought I was going to stay in New York for the longest time until the mastering professor in Berklee had leads on a mastering facility in California that was looking for a mastering assistant. And somehow, just because of passion, and again, just being extra and 100% while in school, the mastering engineer professor referred me to the position. And
that was with Doug Sachs, right?
Doug Sachs. So I eventually became the
legend.
Yeah. So my mentor is Doug Sachs, who is the man behind the mastering lab and is pretty much the mastering engineer known for Pink Floyd, The Doors, Steely Dan, Ken Kelly, so all those people. And I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity to become a mastering engineer, and that pretty much set my whole career to that point as a mastering engineer, because if you mentor with someone like Doug Sachs, you choose to continue that career. You don't waste the opportunity. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to help cut the vinyl record of the very last Pink Floyd Endless River record. So fortunately, when Doug Sachs passed away in 2015, me and my colleagues decided to open the bakery, which is where we are right now. And we still cut records to this day. So there's my story. And how about Brittany? Are you ready to like tell us your story and how you got into this?
I'm sorry about that. But yeah, and it's really interesting that today is kind of a full circle, because I spoke a lot in that that focus piece that Women in Vinyl did about me, about my aunt Sandra, who had this huge library of vinyl. We just had a memorial service today. So just thinking and talking vinyl, it kind of like, it's kind of emotional because it gets me started back on, this was like the aunt that after my grandmother passed, she became like the family historian and always kept all of like the music collections. So, you know, I traditionally like, you know, came up with CDs and tapes and things like that. But as I started getting more into beat making and sampling and starting to realize, hey, you know, records are actually good for something. And I'd approached it from like a beat maker's kind of sampling standpoint. But then the more I started buying and just listening, I started falling in love with music I couldn't really find anywhere else, you know, and especially then eventually after college becoming a DJ, I'm thinking like, wow, some of these like 12 inches have like remixes and acapellas and different dubs that I can't find anywhere. So then I started just collecting just to, you know, it replaced like my bookshelf. Like I stopped collecting books and just, you know, but then eventually I used to date this guy and we would go digging on the weekends. It was like our like morning, like kind of weekend date thing, get up, get coffee, go to the bakery, and then go get vinyl. And he would, you know, make beats every day.
It's
So
like
it
the
was
perfect
always,
date.
Yeah.
it was,
Totally.
you know, it never, you know, unfortunately we're not together, but it's like, I never lost like my appetite for digging. It was just like every weekend, it was like, I need to go up and just hit somebody's crates. But one thing though, that like, unfortunately, you know, a lot of the crate diggers, especially in Cleveland in the mid to late, you know, 20 teens, didn't look like me. So every time, until the owners knew that, you know, I was getting well known as a musician and a DJ, but when it was just regular me, I'd always get followed in the stores. People like, hey, do you know what you're looking for? Just kind of trying to run me out of the place like I was going to steal something. And then sometimes when I'd ask for something very specific, like hip hop, or do you have this or that, or maybe any like R&B, it was like this good old boy type of pride. And yeah, we don't carry that. You know what? I'm not going to say the word in here. And it was just like, and I was forced to start digging online, which I hated, but I felt like a lot of people in Cleveland, especially millennials at one point, most of us who were in a vinyl, we had to start going online. And I got the opportunity to buy my friend's record shop because his bookstore was going out of business, so it's a record store. I was like, I don't know too much about the books business, but I can definitely, you know, work this vinyl. So I bought that from him with my business partner, and the first iteration of the record store was his shop called Young Kings, and it was like 26 crates. It was this weird, funky, unergonomic layout, but it had everything from country to classical to some hip hop. I fell out with my business partner. We parted ways, and I said, well, when I reopened, I wanted to focus on, you know, like Black music, like specifically the stuff that you couldn't find in the other shops. Cleveland has about 7 independent record shops, which is a nice size for the, you know, city. And so I said I wanted it to be a celebration of Black music at home and abroad. Like my mom's from America, my dad's from Jamaica. So I wanted to make sure I had the biggest, most well-curated reggae section. I wanted to have all the hip hop, old and new, funk, soul, boogie, Afro, Brazilian, everything. And then also I wanted it to be the millennials store. You know what I'm saying? So it didn't have that kind of high fidelity complaining about the music that the kids love today. And, you know, just kind of
I love your record store.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in here right now. I think I can flip it around. But like, for example, as a DJ, like, you know, we dig in the crates. So instead of spending a lot of money on like all of these like expensive storage units, I just took a bunch of inverted milk crates, from some dude that kept, I guess, stealing them from the corner store across the street. We worked out a deal, and I cleaned them up. And, you know, it's just kind of like a nod to DJ culture. And just, I wanted people to know when they came in the shop that I'm putting all the money into the music, you know. And then when you come in, here, let me turn around. Like, we have our DJ set up. Actually, the DJ was supposed to be here, but he's late, so that's cool. I don't have to do this interview outside because of the noise. But, you know, just a celebration of like hip hop culture, what it is to be in Cleveland. I'm right in the hood, you know, so it's like, you know, I'm not this, you know, most of the shops are like gentrified, kind of like polished areas, but it's a lot of grit and heart right here and I'm right on the corner of 65th and Fleet. So I wanted it to feel like you were hanging out in my back room where I keep my records, beat machines, and turntables. And we do events here, and it's just like a little funky shop, you know. And the shop surprisingly has outlasted a couple of my music ventures, which have been like well recognized. But even when that fell out, the shop was just staying strong. And fortunately, you know, I could say that COVID, in a bittersweet way, COVID and the uprisings have been the best thing that ever happened to the shop, because I thought that I was going to have to close when I had to first shut down. But, you know, I got the Women in Vinyl piece, which definitely brought a lot of attention to the shop. I got mentioned in OK Player for 8 Black shops to support during COVID, and it just like went viral. And then the reason I say bittersweet is after the George Floyd incident, hashtag Black Tuesday became a thing. And I didn't know what it was until Wednesday. And I thought that somebody had hacked my website. So I went from moving like 20 records a week online to like 100 a day. and it's just like, and the word's been getting out around around the world, like people interviewing, asking what it's like in Cleveland, like what's my relationship as like a Black woman who's a producer or a DJ, or how do I connect with the music? And it's kind of, you know, the shop has been like this great kind of like table setter to open up like cultural conversations. And like I say, it's unapologetically like we celebrate Black culture, history, and music here, but it's not like a divisive shop. It's for everybody to understand and enjoy and come and celebrate. But I just felt like in Cleveland, you know, which is pretty much a Black city, you know what I'm saying? It was just like nothing to really showcase like culturally, like what we're all about. And, you know, people like it. And so I just keep showing up until people stop coming. I know that was long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Oh, that's
I'm loving
awesome.
No, it was great.
Yeah, no, you got me.
Yeah,
got me.
you know, I just, you know, I make beats, house, hip hop, dance hall. I listen to records all day. So it's like, I could do it at home for free, or I could do it here and have some people, you know, pay for it. So, you know.
Sure.
Yep.
So badass.
So rad.
Yeah.
How about you, Jen?
Oh, well, to follow all of that, my story is yeah, I mean, to keep it really, you know, kind of short, I have always just loved music. I've always collected music. My life, I say, was sort of led by music. I was put into ballet as a kid because I was shy. That hasn't gone away. This is like terrifying for me to do. But, you know, and so I literally spent time getting comfortable in front of people with music. And so it's sort of been throughout my life in different facets. But I've always been artistic. And so I went to design school. And so my career, you know, was textile design. I designed clothes for Target, Oshkosh, a bunch of companies for little kids. And so, you know, but again, I always loved music, just had no idea how to get into it. And I actually then transitioned into working for the design college that I went to as a career advisor. So I would help students in the School of Design, which was industrial design, service design, design management, find jobs. And I absolutely loved it. It was really fulfilling. And we had a sound design program, and it always sort of intrigued me, but I didn't really know anything about it. I just would, you know, see what they were doing, finding different ways to make things on screen sound like other things, and it was so fascinating. But I didn't really get to do much with that. And then when I left there, I sort of didn't know what to do. And I worked for a t-shirt company, sort of merging my want to help people by getting into sales things. I'm not a salesperson that's like what you think of as a salesperson. I care so much about what your end goal is. And so I, you know, kind of was combining my want to help people with my design. And then again, when Furnace started pressing in-house, it's actually funny, my mom found the job. She sent it to me and she was like, come home. So, my partner Ray and I, we were living in Nashville at the time, and he was working at United Record Pressing. And
Wow.
we knew that we wanted to do this thing, and we talked about potentially trying to open a shop. And, you know, when Furnace was hiring, it just seemed kind of the best combination of everything. And for me, you know, now truly it is a combination of everything I love to do, because I am helping people. Like, my day to day is truly like, what do you want your package to be? What do you want your final end goal to be? And then I work with them within their price points, within their turn times, within their design ideas, to help them with colors and things like that, to create what they want. And so it's a combination of literally everything that I've done. And so for me, it truly is sort of the dream job to be able to work in music and combine all those other things that I really like. So yeah, I mean, I just took a shot. I mean, my, you know, career is all over the place, and I recently signed up to be a mentor with SoundGirls, because I feel like that volunteer aspect too, you can do all kinds of things to get where you want to be. If you just keep following that thing that we've all kind of said that you love, you'll eventually find your way there, no matter how it sort of, how long it takes or what road you take to get there. So yeah, that's how I ended up here. So
Great.
well, I think
Cool.
It would be interesting to sort of talk about maybe some things that people don't know about our jobs, like what some behind the scenes. I think, you know, is creation of vinyl is something that is very veiled in a way. I don't think, you know, so my personal Instagram is a fairly large following, and when Apollo happened, and for those that don't know, Apollo was a lacquer manufacturer. And lacquers are what you need to kind of start the whole process once you have audio versus vinyl. And so I just put out a poll, and I was sort of like, because I said something and I didn't really get a response. And I was like, that's strange. And so I said, how many of you know what lacquers are? And hardly anyone even knew what it was. But there's so many collectors out there. And so it made me think like, well, this is a whole other part of the process and a whole industry job market that people don't even know what it is. So I think we all kind of have different interesting things that we do. So maybe we could share some things that people don't know about what you do. Who wants to start? Maybe with lacquers or audio.
Well,
Oh,
I was gonna say, since I'm I'm kind of the beginning, and you know, I create the content and the media for you guys to cut your lacquers. And so what you might not know about recording for vinyl, especially if you're going analog, but you have to consider the length of the songs and the length of the side, and to know how many minutes you're going to have on a side, and the shorter the amount of time, the more volume you can get on the vinyl. And so you know, you don't want to pack. It's not anything like a CD was, or well, but just to know that it's better to have 4 really good songs on a side instead of 5 crammed in there, and you'll get a much better sounding vinyl record. And so you have to consider your playlist and your sequence when you're recording and mixing, and you want your more vibrant songs on like the first couple songs. And then that's why often, if listening to vinyl, and I am a huge, this there's a whole nother room in there full of vinyl. This is just like a little fun section, the boutique here. But if you are familiar with listening to vinyl a lot, you will be aware of the fact that the songs closer to the center aren't as loud and bombastic. They'll have more of the acoustic song or something that doesn't have a lot of bass or a lot of volume in it. So it will accommodate that center part of the record. So that's all considerations that have to happen when you're actually creating the music, whether it's digital or analog, for a vinyl record. How's that for just one aspect?
Yeah, and then Jet or Robin or both.
I think Robin can talk about the fact that you were training on lacquering, right? And the whole news about Apollo. That's I think more people should know about that. That was a big issue in the
Yeah, I mean it was one of the reasons that I chose to move to Toronto from Western Canada to pursue this thing. So I got the opportunity to work at the oldest mastering studio in Canada, which was like, what? Oh, sure, no problem. And work with the delightful, talented genie in a bottle that is Kevin Park. I mean, he's incredible. He's made some of the most amazing records to come out of Canada. I mean, he cuts for American artists as well, obviously, but he's made some of my favorite records that I didn't even know until I started to look for his little KP on the Dead Wax. And I was like, oh my God, I totally have that one and I love it and you made it. And he's like, why do you care that much? And I was like, because you made it and now I know why it sounds so good. But sorry. So I got a chance to work there and I knew like this much about lacquers and stuff. I was kind of really trying to dive into what I was trying to do, which was more of the short run thing. And then lacquers were kind of an add-on bonus. And so what happened was there was two providers of lacquers in the world. There was Apollo and there's MDC. Apollo serviced like 80% of the market. They also provided the styli that go into the machines that cut the actual lacquers. So there's like two different ways to cut records. There's cutting lacquers and then there's direct to metal mastering.
Yes, I totally get that.
That's a Jet and me joke right there. So when the week before Apollo blew up, I had my interview with Jenn, and Jenn and I were talking about my biggest like fear for the industry. And I thought that this was like a thing. And I was like, how do they not know that there's only two? And like, what happens if like one blows up or something? And then the next week Apollo blew up. So I don't want to say that I caused that. And we've had this conversation ourselves, but I mean, sorry. But it blew up and it's like a complete loss. And the guy that runs MDC in Japan, as far as I understand, just like makes it out of his house and has like a couple people that work with him. And he was like, if you weren't a client of mine before, like, sorry.
We tracked him down. Like we found out that he's like 4 hours away from like the city of Tokyo.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like he's just surrounded by like forestry and shrubbery. It's like it's very Japan.
I mean, the craftsmanship and all that kind of stuff that goes into the MDCs, like I can get that. I'm not gonna talk smack about Apollo because I mean lacquers are a piece of engineering technology that is like far beyond everyone. The formula apparently exists in some different iterations around the globe. I mean, there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out how to hack it, how to make it, how to figure out the sheeting machine to actually like lay the lacquer on an aluminum disc. I mean, we're probably 6 months, maybe a year out of anybody doing that. It's a tremendous investment for anybody to undertake that as well. I mean, to me, lacquers, anything cut on lacquer sounds better. I mean, I don't know if that has to do with the actual like mastering process where it's like a person doing it. I mean, the direct to metal mastering, there's some incredible engineers that do that too. I mean, there's very few machines that do DMM cuts, but the majority of them come out of one place and they do this visual vinyl mastering, which bless them for their ingenuity and their how do I put this nicely, adherence to like wanting to put out lots of product all the time. Let's say it that way. I bless them for doing it and cranking out lots of records. I've heard some really awesome DMMs. I have a couple. I mean, would they be better if they were lacquer cuts? Maybe, probably.
I'd like to just make a little aside right here. Talking about when Apollo blew up, we were scheduled to cut our lacquers at Capitals with Ron McMaster.
Oh, wow.
When that happened. And what happened to all of the mastering facilities that were cutting vinyl was that they were only allowing their, like at Capitol, you had to be on the Capitol label. You had to be part of their roster, or nobody knew what was going to happen about if any more lacquers were going to be made eventually. And whatever they had backlogged, they were dedicating just to their clients. And fortunately, Ron, because he had already worked with us, they allowed him to bring us in. And so we were able to cut that. But otherwise, if he hadn't been there, we wouldn't be having a record coming out in October that I would be aware of. What I understand is that there's so many of the cutting facilities have backlogs, and yes, the machinery and all burned up and all of that, but the formula still exists. And so from what I have been told, because I have a few other projects hopefully in the pipe happen, that they are hoping that taking the formula to make the lacquer and how to do that will somehow get back into production before everybody runs out of their stockpiles. That's just what I've been told. What do you guys think about that? Yeah, fingers crossed. Of course.
I hope so. I would love nothing more than to scratch my little R2 into a real lacquer that was actually going to be plated and pressed into a 100 run or a 200 run. Bless me, Jesus. I would love that more than anything. But in the meantime, I'll just stick to cutting little PETGs and little polycarbonate blanks, because that's what I do. So.
Just to also add to what Robin and Lenise are saying about lacquer. So probably for many of the people in this panel, you guys probably have not heard of the word lacquer before this panel. So just a little like insider jargon that is worth knowing is for vinyl production to actually make the actual vinyl LP, it doesn't start out as that material. So a typical setup usually has like 3 main stages. The first is the lacquer, which is what Lenise and Robin are talking about. It's not made of the vinyl material. It's not made of the one-off disc that Robin uses for the short run. It's a different material made of aluminum disc coated with nitrocellulose lacquer, and that's you use a heated stylus to cut the master on the actual disc. And then the next stage is where the plating process happens, where this disc gets dipped into a bath of liquid nickel. And the electrolysis happens, and then that's how you come up with the stampers. So the stampers are then moved to the final stage, which is the pressing. where the stampers, which is a negative of the actual music, gets attached side A, side B, facing each other, and then there's like a cookie dough shaped chip of vinyl that is in between. So there's like thousands of heated tons of pressure that presses on it, and the vinyl chip actually melts and molds onto the stampers. So that's like a very simplified way of describing how the actual process happens. And if you look at the group chat, just to add to what Lenise is saying about the length of the music and the quality of the music when you're delivering your music for actual vinyl cutting, I wrote an article about the whole vinyl mastering process in the Isotope website, and it's a pretty easy read for non-vinyl cutters. So look at that link, and we'll try to send it again on SoundGirls page. But that's a really good 101 on what the whole vinyl mastering entails. So yeah.
I want to add one definition too. You referred to an LP, and a lot of people don't know what LP stands for. And that stands for long player. Back in the olden days when 78's, going at 78 RPMs, revolutions per minute, made out of shellac or acid, you know, they break really easily. That was one single. There was typically only one song on a side. And so an LP was an album and had a variety of songs, typically more than one song on a side, unless it was classical and it was, you know, whatever it is. But a long player was one that when 78s were around, 78s had two songs on each side, or maybe only one song on a side with the Edison discs. But they were, you bought them in what looked like a photo album. And you open it up and it had these sleeves, and then the album was, you know, side 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, and those were the discs. So that's why we call a record album an album. It's from those days when it actually was an album. And so a long player is one disc, the vinyl, as we kind of know what modern day vinyl is. And that's what LP stands for, long player.
Yeah.
How about Amanda and Brittany? Any like insider info that you want to share for people outside of the vinyl industry?
I mean, working in archives with vinyl more recently, you know, you're thinking about how do you preserve, you know, luckily, you know, vinyl is the one archival form of sound recording. It's the one thing that's shelf stable that we have, that we know will last. As long as we can play it, it'll still be there no matter how long. And that's a really like motivating factor in terms of keeping music coming out on vinyl, because there is no other form of distribution for sound that will still be there. You know, tape, you know, completely decomposes, and there's just no way around that. We don't know how to, you know, deal with that inherent vice of the, you know, the polymers kind of falling apart and all of the sound shavings coming apart and sticky shed and all of those issues. We, you know, honestly, like grooved sound recordings are the only thing that is shelf stable. You know, CDs have digital rot. They completely just evaporate over time. Hard drives, the same thing. You know, there's, so if you really want to,
they're just data. They're ones and zeros. There's nothing musical about them.
The exact same for, you know, CDs and, you know, yeah. So really thinking about, you know, which the archival perspective is all about forever. How do we maintain these records of our sound history through time forever? And that's a huge goal, and it's a huge undertaking. It's like just overwhelming, because at some point nobody really realized that sound was literally falling off of its recorded medium into the ether. And then all of a sudden we realized that there was a very short amount of time before all of the recordings that had been done up to this point were at risk. And, you know, a lot of that, because the formulas that things were being recorded on were totally non-standardized. You're thinking about like, even disc mediums that weren't standardized before had a lot of problems, whether they were shellacs or, you know, all of the different formulas were just whatever, we're just going to throw a bunch of stuff in there, and then you don't really know what companies were using what mixtures, and so through time you find like all of these various problems that erupt. And you know, now we're at a really interesting point where we know what, we have ways of finding what all of these you know, chemical mixtures are made out of, and becomes very scientific. And we're actually at a point now where we can recreate sound through imaging. And if you can imagine the enormity of that in terms of taking photographs of grooved like recordings and playing sound through things that have been busted and broken and through time, and they just have all of these pieces, and you put them together and you take these really amazing photographs and you can recreate sound through that. Mind-blowing. And this is kind of the idea of preservation, from a kind of, what are we doing in terms of our historical record for sound? And, you know, my love affair with vinyl goes back as long as I can remember. And I always want to pull those threads forward and share music with people and share the history and stories of different musicians. And that is what compels me, and that is what makes me want to be part of making sure that all of these records keep coming out and people keep sharing their stories, and performers keep making money so that they can keep doing what they do. And I think it's really important. So for me, vinyl is the historical record. For me, vinyl is what makes certain that people down the road can continue to hear and experience and be part of our world and be part of our history, which is really important. And not about actually making vinyl, but more about championing and making sure that we make sure that there's a diversified way of obtaining all of the materials that we need, like lacquers and all of the different components, and making sure that those are protected, that there's a lot of different companies that are doing it. The more companies and the more people that are part of this industry in every aspect, and that are doing it mindfully. I know Jen and I talk about kind of different record pressing plants that are doing different things and how they look at the eco costs in terms of vinyl, because vinyl is forever, but it's a polymer, it's fossil fuels, it's, you know, there's a lot of kind of, there is an eco cost, but we have to think about how that balances in terms of, you know, does everything need to be on 180 gram vinyl? Maybe not, because there's something to that. But how do you pick and choose? And I am certainly not the one to do that, but for every leap forward, I think it's important that we consider how it permeates through what we're really trying to do. Not just fill the shelves with records because we want to, because we can, but, you know, but also, yes, because I want all the records just as much as everybody else here wants all the records.
Well, just one thing to say, the goal here is to be able to reproduce the music that we've created. And
Absolutely.
That's what vinyl does more stably than any other format out there. You know, I have sessions on Pro Tools 9 that I can't open in Pro Tools 10.
Absolutely.
So we have to have old formats around, and as you know, as an archivist, this is a huge issue, and so many content creators recording all of their music digitally on some antiquated future antiquated format that they will never be able to play that thing back. And in 5 years, in 2 years. So you must back up your creation to something that you can guarantee that you can reproduce the music. The very first piece of music ever recorded was in 1851, as you know, the Clair de Lune piece, but which was on, it was soot on a piece of paper, and this girl sings, and this little wire vibrates the signal and draws it onto this piece of soot, through the soot from the fireplace onto this piece of paper. And so there's a waveform there. There was no way to reproduce it until 2008 was the first time that piece of music was ever played, as all of us probably know this, because there was no way to reproduce it. So it was able to take the picture, or it was loaded into Pro Tools or whatever. And that was enormous. And when I teach music production or any students or any workshops, I always want to really impress upon them the fact that are you confident that you're going to be able to play this back at a later date? Will you always have some medium where you can take that and play it? Tape, yes, it does disintegrate. However, if stored correctly, we have some chances. But vinyl, you can put it on a turntable, put that stylus on there, and you're going to get sound back out of it. And you can't say that with data.
No, definitely not.
Ones and zeros are just ons and offs.
I just did a really cool project at the beginning of the shutdown of everything. A little label from Singapore asked me if I would do an archiving project with them. And so it's a bunch of like girl-fronted punk rock bands from like the late 90s, early 2000s, and they wanted a way to be able to keep that music and like put it out into different parts of like different countries and stuff. So I did like 47 sevens for them, and I mean it took like 9 million years for them to get there, but it was like so cool to just do a bunch of punk rock in a different language. And I was like, yeah, man, it was mono, and it was loud, and it was awesome. And I was just like, yeah, man, like this is exactly what I got into this for. It was, so I mean, like that whole archiving moment, I'm like here for it. If anybody watching has something, like your grandma giving you a voicemail and you want that on a little piece of vinyl for you forever, like holler at me, because that is like what I want to do forever. Like I'm into just like doing weird little archiving projects. It's like my little pet monster with doing short run. So
there's actually a conference coming up about that called Basement Tapes that I was involved with last year and have been invited to participate and volunteer for this year, because I have reel-to-reel quarter-inch tape machines and cassette players and micro cassette players. And the whole point is that the general public takes the medium, the reels, or, back in the day, they had these little tape recorders that people did audio letters on. And they, and so many of those at the speed of 3 3/4 or 1 7/8. Very, very slow, but it's dialogue, so it didn't have to have a lot of high fidelity. But nobody has a way to reproduce these. So this archival conference that happens here in Los Angeles, hopefully it'll happen in November like it did last year. The general public can bring those tapes, and there's a whole slew of us with all sorts of playback apparatus, and people get to hear their grandmother and hear them as a baby and hear whatever is on these tapes. It is enormously touching.
Yeah,
And
totally.
besides somebody, somebody had recorded Elvis in Vegas on a little recorder, and that was hilarious to hear. Again, the fidelity isn't terribly great, or even on those micro cassette from answering machines.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And messaging and interviews and things. So it's an issue being able to reproduce these sounds from all these different formats, and then how do you capture that in a stable fashion that can be reproduced for the longest period of time? I say vinyl.
Our archivists become inherently technology hoarders, I think, because you have to cannibalize machines all the time to make sure that you have at least one in working order for every single kind of playback machine. Every archivist I know has just a mountain of playback machines of every kind.
And some just for parts.
Yeah, they just cannibalize them into like whatever they need, taking them out. And,
it's a huge issue, as you know.
It's technology obsolescence is the problem, but it doesn't happen with vinyl. With vinyl, you'll know it's always the same.
Pull it out, put it on. You got a turntable, and
you don't even need a turntable. I think everybody saw that viral video going around of that the dude with the hat on the upside down drill. Like, that was amazing. And it was exactly why, like, it speaks to how stable and how usable and how forward thinking they were in the 1800s to come up with this crazy format that has just persisted. But that's exactly it. He turns over a hand drill and like puts the record on it and puts a piece of putty so that he can like amend the speed a little bit, and then creates a little cone and a pin cone, and it's just like, and it plays, and it was like it was perfect. I mean, I was like, yep.
Did it damage the recording though?
I'm sure, but
yeah, see, that's a consideration too.
It is. I mean, you don't want to hurt them, but
to kind of what people may not know. I think, we should kind of step back into the pressing process that Jet sort of mentioned a little bit.
Totally.
Because I think there's a ton there too that people don't know. So like, people don't know the time, how long it's going to take.
Yes.
Well, also test pressings too. I wanted to bring up test pressings and that element, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So basically, one big thing I get a lot is what is the sticker on my record? And I'm like, people often mean stickers as center labels. The majority of people don't realize that the labels are baked and then pressed with the vinyl. So,
you hope they're baked properly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or they'll explode, which looks kind of cool, but you don't want it. But yeah, so I mean, you get your labels. They have to be a certain kind of paper. You bake them. And then those actually go on either side of the puck in between the stampers to then get pressed. And then something that I'm talking to people day in and day out about is overs. Nobody understands what overs are. We have to order overs for your print because we can't just say we're going to press 300, 500, 1,000 records, boom, stop. Because this process is so old. It's still a boiler. It's still steam. It's applying pressure. So anything could happen. If there's not enough steam, you could get, an issue like non-fill, which will sound on your record. You could get stitching on your record. And so once those are pressed and cooled, hopefully they're cooled. We're seeing a lot of warping happening from various plants because things aren't cooled. But
or sleeving right off the press where it gets scratched.
Right. But once that happens, then they have to be quality controlled. So then, we're looking at them for all of those issues before they then get packaged to then go out to you. So there's a lot of different steps. And like Lenise mentioned, part of the upfront part of that process is your test presses. And so when I tell someone, it could take 10 weeks for their record, they're like, oh my God. So my biggest thing for people wanting to press a record is plan ahead, like,
yes, and
I need my thing in 5 weeks. Well, then you're probably going to have to waive a test press because the point with the test presses is to make sure everything is the right sequence, the right sound, that there's no developing issues in your metal, something like, a pop or a tick. So those are
Crossover.
yep. And that your sides are labeled right, all of that. And so you want to get those, listen through them, make sure everything's correct, sign off on them, and then we go into your full run. And so I think a lot of that is not understood. We get a lot of requests we want our records in a month. And I'm just like, well,
good luck.
Yeah.
But one-offs, the one-offs, Robin can provide in a month.
We had, they sent us 10, this is from RTI here in Camarillo, and that's after much research and getting referrals from various mastering engineers, and based on it's an independent project, Primal Kings Records. So our process was, once we cut it with, before we even cut it with Ron McMaster, we had to figure out where it was going to go, because that lacquer had to be shipped immediately, correct? So because it changes quality within like a 10-hour period, according to him. The sooner you can ship your cut lacquer from the mastering facility to the manufacturing facility, so they can do the processes and create the stampers. And so it's a very quick process. So you have to look for how much is it going to cost for whatever run that you want to have. What is the quality of vinyl? Do they use virgin vinyl, or do they reuse, recycled vinyl? And what are the issues that you as the quality level that you want? Is it 180? Is it 200 audiophile? Does that really make the difference? What happened? And so they created the stampers, and then they sent us 10 test pressings, and between the band members and myself, playing them back on, we did one playback in our analog studio together on a Techniques turntable. And so we all listened to that one, and then we each took a test pressing home and played it on our different systems. And one of the test pressings played on an Audio-Technica turntable that was more of a consumer model, not a high-end consumer model, but which they have pulled off the market and recreated for this reason, because if there was a heavy bass on a lot of vinyl, the shape of the stylus would not stay in place, and it would jump out, and you'd have crossover. And on one of the test pressings, from the same stamper and everything, there was one place that on of course, the leader of the band's Audio-Technica turntable, it would pop out at the same place. So we got it under the microscope, and we all did, and we looked at it, and then we sent it back, and they said, well, that's just 1 in 10. The other 10, they didn't jump. But on his turntable, it did. And he said, I'm the general public. It has to be, if it can't play on a turntable like this with this kind of, commercial stylus, we can't have, all of these. You're talking about overs. They said, well, we can cut it, and then we'll give you X amount over for any that gets sent back. And he said, well, we don't want that. So Ron recut it, and that one side for us, and to lower the level, just half a dB made all the difference. So that one little thing wasn't there anymore, and it played back perfectly on a less than stellar turntable, but that's something that so many of the general public buying vinyl now don't realize. You can't just buy a Crossley turntable and all they want to do is play vinyl, but they don't know the different qualities of turntables and stylus and playback capabilities. And so you have to consider the lowest common denominator in this, and who is your target audience, and how many returns do you want, or you know, who are you making this record for? And
Right.
and so these are all considerations that you know, when I've started out, everybody wanted, you know, back in the day, you had the best speakers and the best turntables and the best amplifiers and preamps and blah, 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 stylists and all of that. Now people just, it's consumable, and it has to be able to play on anything.
Yeah, and I think a lot of plants like are using different kind of more quality control turntables that are more friendly to the general public for that reason, because that's what most people are listening on. But also, you know, it could be where if it is appearing on one test press that it's not going to appear on the full run, because it could be an issue with a stamper that developed. That's why, you know, we run a certain amount of test presses and you get a certain amount, because you throw out a certain amount as well. So it is really interesting, and it's things that people don't really understand. So it's a lot of kind of going back to what I was saying before with the advising and helping. It's that kind of learning process for a lot of people to understand. So
yes.
Sorry, Jen. I think it is really, really difficult for a lot of those like high volume plants though, to try and, you know, outfit their QC rooms with a variety of turntables. You know what I mean? Like some of those turntables are working for like 18 hours a day. You know, how often are you changing a stylus? You know, there's a portion of the population that doesn't know how to change a stylus properly, or, you know, what the different cartridges are as well too. So they do expect a certain price point to, you know, be playable or whatever. But I mean, I think that goes back into educating the public too, as to what their expectations are and what the price point means. It's not a reflection of like what this record is. It's a reflection of how many people have touched it to actually get it into your hands. So, I mean, educating people as to like what a different setup is going to be, but also like, you know, anytime I have the luxury of 5 minutes to be able to review one of my own records on my Instagram, I try and like search out like who cut it, who plated it, like where it was pressed, yada, 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 because like those details are important and those details aren't reaching the public. So like, in my opinion, mastering is a complete black art. We're the total like wizards of what we do, and nobody understands that part because it's total sorcery. But like,
agreed.
You know what I mean? And like, there's so many people that are like, you do what? How? What? Ugh. And I'm like, I know. But
yeah, I would never master my own music. People say, oh, well, you know, there's all these great mastering programs. I'm not a mastering engineer. You guys, I can record and I can mix, but I don't want to master it, because all you guys do all day long is make hit records. You're objective. You're not married to this song like I am. I can't possibly be as objective as you can. Also, every one of you has your different style, your different mastering chain, what you have created to come up with that sound that you do. That's why artists do shootouts with, you know, mastering engineers. You send out the same bit to each one of you. You do your bit on it, and that's how we choose who we want to master it, by what we liked that we heard, your style. And it's not right or wrong. It's just that's how you individually, as the mastering engineer artist, that's how you mastered it. And so then my decision as a producer is to choose which one makes the most sense for the vision of our product that we want to put out and our music. And so I would never want to do that, because it's so personal, and it is such a subtle art. Every one of you are artists, and I absolutely depend on that.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to say about the stylist too, I don't mean to dominate this, but Brittany, and you know this very well, a lot of people don't understand that the shape of the stylus, of the needle, is so important depending on what your purpose is. And if you're going to be making beats and you're going to be DJing and you need to go back and forth, you need to have that conical stylus. So it's rounded instead of the one that, you know, only goes in one direction, because you can't go back on that, you know? You can't go back on that. Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Well, you know, and also like coming from the DJ field, depending on how often you back cue, if you got a straight versus a S curve style tone arm, all of that, you know, comes into play. Because a lot of people, when they ask about their first turntable, well, I'm like, well, what are your intentions with this turntable? Like, are you just listening? Are you just, you know? And I saw somebody had put in the comment on about how to confront family, friends, and loved ones about cross sleeves without seeming like a snob. And I feel like, you know, sometimes the short answer is you can't do it without seeming like one. You know, some people have to start sometimes with limited or something that might be of lower quality just to get a foot in the door. And then they'll notice, hey, this sounds kind of like crap. So I might want to get a better, you know, turntable or a better needle or a better this or a better that, or maybe I should arrange my speakers differently. And I think, you know, a lot of us get so comfortable, you know, because vinyl can be very pinky up nowadays versus where it used to just be the main format for a lot of years, is that, you know, with whether it's anything, if you're in the photography, video, ceramics, that there's always like your crappy starter kit a lot of times. You know, there's always something that kind of whets the appetite. And sometimes some people like, hey, I had a little crappy Crossley, it collects dust in the back and I'm cool with Spotify, you know. And some people are like, you know what, I know I needed more, and it kind of sent me down this vinyl rabbit hole. And so, you know, I just think that's the beautiful thing about it. Like, as long as we're opening up conversations and people knows, I'm sorry, let that pass. As long as people know that there's a community that then they can tap into and still sharpen and still, like where we're talking now, there's a lot of people, especially women, that don't know that the questions you have can be answered. And there's a lot of people who could point you in the right directions. And, you know, so long story short on that with the needles and whatnot. So.
No, it's so important. Go ahead. My thought went somewhere else, sorry. It'll come back.
Probably questions that were submitted. So let's see. I think we had a question here for Amanda. How can you tell us about how you moved from archives into your position at Universal? Does being a formal archivist inform the work that you currently do, and if so, how?
It does. A lot of one of the things that I learned when I started working in digital distribution, kind of at the very beginning, was kind of how all of that works on the back end. And I learned very quickly that a lot of the problems in digital distribution were coming from metadata. And I really went back to school to get my degree in archives, not only because I wanted to learn everything about the history of sound and work on preserving these stories, but also because I knew that no matter where my career was going to take me, I was going to have to understand metadata. It is the foundation of literally everything. And it is the gaping black hole secret of a dumpster fire in the music industry right now.
Well said, my dear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It is the secret that no one is talking about and everyone is absolutely ignoring. That is a whole discussion on itself. But I will say that going back to study how information storehouses have functioned and evolved throughout the eternity of our previous history as humans, and how we collect information, store it, and protect it through time, really boils down to these tiny pieces of information, data points, and how you track them and how we can organize and deal with that. And when you think about, to bring this into a music perspective, think about Discogs. Like, almost everybody I'm sure here has been on Discogs, has used it, has searched something through there. And to think about the fact that that is almost entirely user generated data that is just nerds like us going in there and typing all this stuff in, and think that most of that information has never been tracked until Discogs. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, seriously? There's no, labels don't have that information. And, you know, nobody does.
A lot of it is incorrect. And it's very hard to fix. If
90% of it is incorrect.
I mean, I'm just stunned when I look at my discographies or whatever. It's like,
yeah,
well, mostly my name's not even spelled right, and so a lot of my credits aren't there. These are all. This is how we get paid. And,
exactly.
This is our revenue streams, and as you're saying, this is absolutely critical to making a living on this. Getting your metadata, you know, all of you artists out there who want, when you say, you know, so-and-so play my song and it comes up somebody else's song because your metadata had, you know, one small
space in the wrong place, or
it's the tiniest little thing. Oh, yeah. Yes, and they'll screw things up like, you know, I will have done one song on this record when I had done the whole thing, or I'd done one episode of a TV show and I did 6 seasons of it, you know, and it's, but that was the one that was submitted for an Emmy, and so that's the only one nobody knows. And it's just like, it's so incorrect. And so it's absolutely essential that you be accountable for that metadata of yours if you want to ensure that it is, if you're going to sign off on it, you know, make sure you look through it, make sure it's absolutely right, it's absolutely consistent, and it's so
and complete,
minutia intensive. It's just, it just drives me cuckoo. That's another reason why I hire real mastering engineers, because I'm a knucklehead at that stuff. And you guys have your production teams, or you have your own way of doing it, and you know that if it's going to go to Spotify, if it's going to go to Tidal, if it's going to go to Apple, if it's going to go, you know, whoever wraps it, I don't even know anymore. They all have their different requirements.
Oh yeah, yeah. And every digital service provider is different. But even if it's just a retailer, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, how do you buy a record through like a larger online retailer, it's still that metadata that drives that purchasing power. So it's not just digital distribution, it's still physical distribution that's being driven by these little pieces of information. And so learning that in the archival sphere allowed me to kind of pivot back towards how are we solving problems for artists that are putting out music today. And so it very much, I went kind of like this in terms of connecting to that, but becoming an advocate and for metadata, as just brutally boring as it can be for a lot of people. Even people that work in music glaze over as soon as you say the word metadata, and they like just want to like immediately disappear, and they hope that you don't run after them as you're like trying to like just implore them to you know deal with it. And I have had like the biggest compliment of my life, I think I would say, is probably when the one the kind of the head of the archives department at the grad school that I went to, I had lunch with him, and he said, I can't conceive of how you managed to make music metadata just exciting and totally like interesting. He's like, will you teach a class on it? And I was like, no, I will not do that, but I will continue to run after people and try to implore them to confront it, but and to help musicians through working on music metadata and trying to come up with new ways to distribute music. And that's what I do. So I don't know if that answered the question, but hopefully.
How long was your program is what I'm curious. When Now, is it a master's program? Did you already have a degree and then you went back and got a special degree in archiving? How long did that take you?
It's a 2-year program, full-time master's degree. I went to this University of Texas at Austin because they're one of the few programs that have a hands-on like audio studio. Not most of the schools of information, which is what they're called for archives, are deal with sound in a theoretical manner, because moving image, sound, time-based mediums are messy and expensive, and people hate them, and they're like the red-headed stepchildren of the archival world, because it takes a lot of time and energy and passion to deal with them. Mostly it takes a lot of money, and so it's a challenging thing. So you want to pick a program that has that hands-on and kind of aspect to it. And then I started, I joined the Association for Recorded Sound, which brings to
ARSC.
Yeah, ARSC. And now I'm a board member.
Fantastic.
And so, it's one of the few professional organizations that brings together collectors that are not professionals with professionals that work in sound, and really creates a community around recorded sound through time. There's a lot of research in terms of kind of the actual manufacturing and the physical objects, and also in terms of historical context and discographies and stories about musicians and all of that. So it spans the entirety of recorded sound, and I cannot recommend
organization. I just
absolutely
love
join.
Their conferences are so worth attending, and the presentations that people have, everything from recreating a broken wax cylinder, which got a standing ovation, to
absolutely
Frank Zappa's archivist wondering how do you archive pneumatic 1630 tapes that he was one of the pioneers of digital, and now they're all disintegrating, and she was desperate, and
it's
then
really cool,
record labels, the 1920s Mexican record labels, and all these just fascinating collections. People mixed cassettes, people from the 80s.
Every kind.
It's ARSC, ARSC, Association.
ARSC.org. Check them out.
Association of Recorded Sound Collectors, and it's professionals and enthusiasts, and it's just, if you're into this stuff, it's fantastic.
And I think it's a good segue to, because we only have a couple more minutes here, to everyone sort of providing any resources, suggestions to both how to get your foot in the door and how to make our industry more inclusive. Both gender and race, I think, have come up sort of as a general question that we were sort of presented with. So yeah, I would say resources and what you all think that we can do to make a more inclusive vinyl community. So whoever wants to start, have at it.
Well, I wanted to comment on Brittany back when you were saying that when you were first going to record stores, nobody else looked like you. And my thought was celebrate that and put that out there. You became a thing, and you have to make lemonade out of this stuff, and be that person. You don't want to be like anybody else. You want to be that one that stands out, because that's how people are attracted to you for what you do. So don't go, oh no, I don't look like anybody else. That's really good. And also, if you speak more than one language, that's really good. And also be really good at what you do and feel confident about it. And you don't have to know everything starting out. Nobody expects you to. And don't act like you do, because that's not good either. But be confident in what you do know. And if somebody asks you to do something or asks you something, say, well, I don't know that right now, but I can find out. And then go find out. But those are ways that have always worked. When I started, there weren't no women, and but that didn't even occur to me that would be an issue. I did not play that card at all, because I just wanted to do this thing. So whatever that thing is you want to do, just focus on that, and use your differences as a calling card, and embrace those and celebrate those. And that's how you will go forward, because people will pick up on how you feel about yourself. If you're not confident and you think, oh, I can't do this because I'm a girl, or I'm gay, or I'm trans, or I'm a person of color, whatever that is, then somebody else is going to say, okay, you're right, you can't, because that's how you feel. Don't let that be what defines you. What defines you is that thing that you want to do.
Yeah. Brittany.
I'll piggyback on that. And the thing is like, representation and exposure is important. Like, I would say to anybody who wants to make vinyl more accessible and more of a, like, what people consider is, I guess, antiquated. And I like what Lenise said earlier about future antiquated, because, like, coming from the DJ space, still most of my gigs might be on Serato, but we all know if you don't do a firmware update, there's no more vinyl record pools anymore. People aren't really digging for records. So all DJs are using the same equipment, have the same access to songs, and it's nothing to really distinguish you. And with Shazam, there's little to no exclusivity a lot of the times anymore. So I say, like, if you do DJ or in the community, or if you play the music, like, literally, like, make an effort to be seen spinning vinyl. You know what I'm saying? There's so many portable, lightweight, as we call them, like, chick-friendly systems that you don't have to break your back or get a dolly to, like, lug in the place. Like, I DJ vinyl as much as I can, and I'm outside of the shop because I have the vinyl DJ in there. So, like, when people come and buy records, they see records are being spun. They see everyday people, from, like, regular collectors who are forced to get on the turntables. Because if you shop with me more than 2-3 times and I see you've got some funk and some good taste, I make you hop right on those turntables, and I'll show you how to use the crossfader, all the way to people who are traveling, you know what I'm saying, professional DJs, but just to kind of make it like an equalizer. And the thing about it is, like, people have to see that vinyl is like a perfect design. Every controller, every technological piece, or I call them toys at this point, that they use to trigger music is still based off of 2 turntables and some type of mixer or crossfader technology. And, no matter where music goes, vinyl is still going to be there. So, like, people have to see it. Like, I'll say, I can be DJing a Motown set or doing a dance party with Serato, and I'm spinning songs at a song per minute, and it's just like a crazy whirlwind of energy. But if I'm taking my time, just doing some simple beat matching, and I'm spinning 45s or regular vinyl, people are, like, looking over the DJ booth. People want to see what it is, because it's like I'm literally bringing archives, with me. It's like I'm literally, like, instead of just being a DJ, I realize at 33 now, people look at me as like a funky librarian, which is, like, way cooler. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like I'm a
Own that
traveling,
title.
like,
Awesome.
Yes, I love that.
Funky librarian.
It's like I went to the archives, I dug out these scrolls, I want to share it with you. Like, I tell people, like, if you've ever heard, like, Kiss by Prince on 45, the original, versus, like, because I know that song, like, he made sure they took the bass tracks out. He's like, I want the drums to be mixed, where the kicks are going to be enough for the low end. And versus where I think of at my age, I only really remember the remastered version or CD that I heard on radio. But when I got the 45 and I went back and listened to it, I'm just like, what is going on, right? Like, I've never heard this version. And it's sometimes also, that vinyl is timeless. Like, vinyl is forever. And the more of these, and I love the term future antiquated, it's because planned obsolescence is such a part of our society now. Like, it's like, I hate buying a new phone because I know it's designed to be crap in 2 years because a new one's coming out. Or I know they're going to throttle, like, my processing speed just until I get angry enough and get a new one. But vinyl is vinyl is vinyl. You know what I'm saying? Like, I spent all this money on these
Amen.
like crap controllers, but the controllers, if you know now, have phono lines. You know what I'm saying? So it's like even the controllers had to circle back, and it's almost like you don't really have a professional controller if it can't double for vinyl. So vinyl is always coming back, and I feel like just like you know, photography, like I was one of the last years that my high school had a dark room before things went digital. You know, the way people are producing even more, like after thousands of Zoom videos a day, when I go and produce, like I'm working on a doll list setup. You know what I'm saying? I used to think those are the biggest, nerdiest weirdos, and they just had this weird scene. But like now that everything's online, it's like I crave to touch things. I want to make beats and look out the window instead of at a screen. So I think now that we've kind of gotten to this like postmodern where nothing really is it's whatever you want it to be and nothing means anything anymore, people want to have something that they can touch and that they can feel, you know, and vinyl to me sonically embodies that like realness, you know. And sometimes now I love it how in certain circles, you're as an artist, you don't even have chops unless you have a vinyl. You know what I'm saying? It was kind of like a hipster thing for a second where it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But it's just like people want to like, I want to hear what you sound like on vinyl. And it means something, you know? So I just say like, be out, spin vinyl, like, and if you're in a smaller city, that's even better because like you can be the spearhead of your vinyl scene. You know what I'm saying? You know, if you're cool with the bar, set up a turntable Tuesday where you bring your turntable and invite people to bring their vinyl and share it with others. It's a great way to get conversations and just, you know, just build the scene. Like, you know, it starts with you. And especially if you're a woman, if you're like person of color, if you're whatever, if you're different, like that's, you know, that is your calling card. And somebody's going to see it. Especially some little girl's going to be like, oh, well, shit, I can do that too. Yeah. You know, I was just very determined and stubborn, but I know not most people are like that. You got to sometimes see it to really, you know, envision it. So like I said, you know, just if you've got this stuff, bring it out. Be social with your vinyl, you know, like DJ vinyl if you're a DJ. Get with your, like, have a vinyl night, or just even like some people have supper clubs and book clubs. Have a vinyl dinner party with friends and everybody brings something. And it's just like, you know, and it gets really cool really fast, and just maintain it and make sure you can do it regularly. You know, like if it's once a week or once a month, or something that you can maintain, because with the periodicity of it, like people will appreciate it and people will show up.
And it's the people that, what you're saying over and over again is that it's the human element that makes a difference. It's not about the technology. It's not about the gear. It's not actually even about that black thing or whatever color it is. It's about the human interaction and the tactile and the sharing of the experience, and the person and personality involved in it. And so it's about the song and it's about the people. And one last thing I wanted to say to encourage everybody, when I was coming up, I was so myopic. I didn't need anybody to tell me no. I needed them to tell me how. And just keep that in mind. If somebody tells you no, says that the girls don't do this, or trans people don't do this, or there aren't enough jobs or anything like that, somebody's doing this stuff. Somebody is doing it. It might as well be you. And if that's your joy and your passion, make you that person that's doing it, and seek out the people who will tell you how, not no.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, Women in Vinyl is there for that reason. If you see somebody that's inspiring to you, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to contact that person and ask them if they feel comfortable to discuss with you what they do in further detail. You know, maybe someday we'll be able to evolve it into a job board of its own. There is A2IM job board, the NAM job board, and I'll send out something, post something on Women in Vinyl as well with those resources. But yeah, I mean, we're all here because we want to help, and you know, you should feel free to reach out to us, and we're here to help you get your foot in the door.
That's one of the things that I have seen in the questions too. A lot of these incredible ladies have education in their field and in our vinyl business, and I did not. So do not let school stand in your way. That doesn't, I mean, especially with what Jed and I do, it's definitely like a learned apprentice kind of, you
I
gotta
didn't
be
learn
all is.
vinyl in school.
Yeah.
exactly. And even to a point, probably even Lizette, like I keep calling you the wrong name, man. But everybody has had to learn from someone. So it's not like you are going to go into a classroom and you're going to learn everything that you need to know. So
Not
don't let that
at
stand in your
all.
way.
Yeah.
Lenise, I don't know why I keep calling you the wrong name. I'm so sorry.
Just
Anyway.
don't call me late for dinner.
Will not, and would love to take you one day when I'm allowed to go to your country again.
Vice versa.
Yeah. But to anybody that's interested in any portion of the process, like send any of us a note. We're all super approachable. We have Instagram. Instagram is one of the best tools, I think, to propagate vinyl culture. If you look at most of the hashtags on Instagram, and maybe it's just my algorithm, but it's all vinyl collection, vinyl IG, blah, 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 blah. But the number of interactions that I've had with people that want to get involved in vinyl is huge on the daily. It's connected a bunch of random lathe cutters and mastering engineers and things like that, because what Jenn and I do is very insular. We're not like Brittany, and we're not out playing records, and we're not out in the community doing.
We're the hermits.
Exactly, and that's exactly what we are. So sometimes, and even to Jenn, and even archiving and working in a studio, like there's a lot of times if you think that it's going to be this like big social party, like, I'm sorry, but this is the wrong job for you. If you think that it's going to be like blow and hookers and liquor and parties and stuff, like that may have been in the 60s and 70s, but baby, it is over.
Yeah, nobody has those budgets anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody has the fun that they did. And that's maybe why music has devolved a bunch of the ways.
I don't miss it.
But I mean, every single industry has lots of unique challenges. You know, gender sometimes can be a barrier to entry. When I was standing on the platform waiting for the guy that was creating my lathe for me to pick me up to teach me how to use it, he said, "Oh, you're a girl?" And I said, "Surprise!" And he said, "Girls don't do this." And I was like, "Well, I'm here." So
oh, screw you.
and he was like, at the end of like my training and all that kind of stuff, he's like, "You're going to make great records because you're here for the right reason and you want to do it." He's like, "It's what makes your heart beat." And I can see that. So, I mean, your passion will always drive you. There's 100 different ways to get into vinyl. There's a bunch of different ways to work with vinyl. You can work at a record store. You can work for a label. I mean, you could start a label if you are crazy and want to. You can, you know, work at a hi-fi shop. You could work at a guitar store. You can learn recording software by working at a guitar store. There's a million different ways, and there are a million different points of entry. So, I mean, we're just a cross-section of different points, but that's not the only way. And it's not just a record pressing plant that you can work at. So, I mean, everybody has different gifts, and there's room for everyone, literally everyone, especially in this industry. So don't let anything really stand in your way. Kind of figure out what is your gift, and then we can, like, there's different ways to apply that in every scenario. So, I mean, for all of the questions that we have, I mean, you know, maybe that's one of the reasons that vinyl does have such a cult following, because it's a heritage item that has been passed down from person to person to person. I have records in my collection that are shellacs, and they're from 1904, and they're super weird. And Amanda, I have lots of questions about like how to hermetically seal them and restore them to their once prior glory. And
we'll talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you know, so there's
I want to learn that.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. Like, so, you know, I just want to encourage anybody that has sat through this panel and watched and participated to, you know, just like think big. Every single piece of all of these processes exist on the internet. I mean, coming into cutting lacquers and cutting vinyl and cutting short run has led me to want to learn how to plate. And like, that's some sorcery too. And I am like this close to buying like an at-home electroplating.
You're gonna have like a full vinyl
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm the one-stop shop, baby.
Exactly.
But that's exactly it. You can be as OCD and control freaky as you want with vinyl, and that's the other beautiful part, because you can be a total audiophile and be like, oh yeah, I've got, this is my Ortophone 50 for playing rock and roll, and this is my this for playing jazz. You know, like, you can do that. You can bring out your MVP for whatever. You can have a bunch of different speakers you can do, or you can have a 1957 dual 560 from Germany that you've never changed the cartridge on, that you've been listening to your whole life. Because that's what I have. Because it was my mom's, and she gave me that and was my record player, and nothing will ever sound as good as anything that is played on that record player. Nothing. Lasts forever.
How do you clean your vinyl? Sorry, I know we have to run out, but I'll have to ask you. How do you clean your vinyl?
Ooh, I mean, I have a cheeky sponsorship with the Groove Washer, so I mean,
Okay.
Sponsored by.
At least have a disc cleaner.
Yeah,
you know,
I love those guys. I have an old school brush, yeah, and then I have a microfiber one as well.
Yeah, one of these with the doodad, and learn how to use it correctly. You know, taking good care of your vinyl is absolutely essential too.
I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, Amanda.
It truly is, but that has to, so think about that, everybody out there.
Next time.
But yeah, any questions and wants me to pump their tires, I will do this for you all day. You want some leadership and guidance into a super punk rock DIY way into the music business? I'm your girl. Holler at me. Yeah, I mean, I've done it all.
We actually have like several other, like a huge list of questions from everyone who's registered. But since we're out of time, maybe this is like a good opportunity to just for the Women in Vinyl website to like, we can gather our answers offline, and maybe we can release it as like an article by Jenn down the road. But yeah, we're really eager to answer as many of the questions that you guys submitted. But yeah, I think going to the womeninvinyl.com website and looking at everyone's profiles and seeing what everyone does, and just probably following each of these facilities on their social media pages. For example, like Furnace posts a lot of job openings, and I always like get excited of all the job openings that get posted there, because for many who are not familiar with vinyl, there's a lot of like job opportunities that are just in this vinyl industry alone that not a lot of people know exist. So by following these women and their job facilities on social media, you really get to open your eyes to all the opportunities that you guys can explore. So I think that's also another way to really celebrate the format and just really expand women in vinyl in general.
Yeah, and we all have expansive networks. Like,
yes,
Jenn might not know exactly the person that you want to talk to, but maybe Jet and I do. Maybe Amanda. You know, there's a million ways to skin a cat. So I mean, not that I'm advocating animal cruelty, Jenn. I love your cats.
I want to know how to save the chat. I went under the three dots there. I want to save all these questions and all the comments. And I know when you quit the Zoom, then the chat goes away.
We'll copy paste it on our shared document.
Thank you.
All the questions.
We'll all coordinate after to get those put together, and I'll do a share on Women in Vinyl for everybody.
Wonderful, thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody so much for doing this. To the SoundGirls and for everybody that hung out with us. This was a great opportunity.
Thank you.
To be able to do something like this again.
Yeah,
time flew.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for including me. And,
Happy Saturday.
For being
Thank
here.
you guys.
Bye everybody. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, be safe out there. Wear a mask. Do all the things.
Thank you.